Where are you, man? It seems like you have a different setup than usual.
I'm in my daughter's room because it's Easter Monday. Everyone's home. Usually I have the run of the place, but not on this
Not
Monday.
this time.
So
Okay.
not this time. Yeah, not on this April Fool's Day. Maybe that's what I'm doing. I'm doing an April Fool's joke.
I really don't like April Fools. It's this is such a stupid tradition. I mean,
It's not good
I
for
like
our business. It's not good for our business.
Yeah, I know. It's like the as if we needed more fake news than there are already. I think it was the Maple Leafs that floated the idea of Phil signing Phil Kessel. Was it I suspect. I suppose it was a prank.
Yes.
No.
I'm all for pranks. I hope they got Phil Kessel's okay with it.
Right. Well, they must have checked with him beforehand. Otherwise, it's rather
imagine.
rude.
Today. So today the Canadians say Christian Dvorak is day-to-day and will likely play before the beginning of the season, or the end of the season, I should say. And every reply to that tweet was, "Is this an April Fool's joke? Are you?"
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that'd be a pretty lame April Fool's joke. But anyhow, was not an April Fool's joke, by the way. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, happy April Fool's Day to everyone. Hope everyone got out there unscathed without retweeting some bogus news item. But here we are. We're going into final stretch of the season. It's April, and there are still a lot of difficult opponents facing the Canadians on their schedule. But it's starting to get the feel of garbage time of the season right now in terms of what are you playing for, what are you doing. But the one thing about the Canadians, the Canadians announced that Caden Primo won the Molson Cup for the month of March. Usually I don't pay much mind to who wins the Molson Cup, but I think this is a significant development. The Canadians goaltending is top notch. It really is. And it's really something that I think gives them some reason to think that they can be competitive more competitive next season because they have these two guys.
Well, it's certainly not because of the goaltending that they've had the sort of season that they had as a team. I mean, over the weekend, there's this guy that maybe you follow on Twitter. His Twitter handle is JFresh. He's big on charts and player cards mainly. That was his brand of developing player cards, and he had this chart about goalies goal differential above expectations, and the Montreal Canadiens are actually quite high on that list. So as a group, goalies have saved 13 goals above expected, and they're third in the league for goal saves above expected in all situations. They're third in the league. It's
20. It's plus 20. It's 20 goals saved above expected. 20.4.
Yeah, and the team is still like almost at minus 50 overall. So it's crazy when you think that they gave up. I mean, they saved 20 goals more than expected, and the team is still, what is it, minus 49, I think? Anyway, they're pretty close to the bottom of the league. So had it not been for Montembeault's performances, but lately Primo too, and Allen maybe in the first month of the season, it would be even worse when it comes to the goals against column. Is it a good sign when you say that? Well, it bodes well for the future because of those two guys and the way they've performed this year. But it also suggests that as a team, defensively, they've got ways to go before being competitive.
Well, they do, except they have the pieces are right in front of them. I mean, they have a young defense, and one of their veteran defenseman, plays a lot of minutes and is mistake prone. Is on the ice for a lot of goals against, and Mike Matheson. And so I think there's reason to believe, you see the progression Arber Xhekaj has made in his defensive game. Caden Gooley, even though the floor was really high, has made progression in his defensive game. Jordan Harris and Jaden Struble, for sure. I mean, Jordan Harris's defensive game is really starting to pop a little bit, I find. Like, just the way he carries himself in the defensive zone gives him a dimension. We keep talking about him like not really having a dimension other than his feet, but I think his defensive play is starting to become a dimension for him. So, the one thing is, like, the goal, this will be, I guess, 2 straight years where Sam Montembeault has taken on the role of Carey Price in screwing up the Canadiens draft lottery odds. You could look at it that way and say their goaltending has, right now they're sitting, what is it? Sixth from the bottom. Yeah. 6th from the bottom in the league.
Yeah.
1 point up or down on Arizona. But 8 points on Columbus. So really, goaltending is going to probably, and who knows, Arizona might pass Montreal from between now and the end of the season. They have a bit of an easier schedule than Montreal in terms of their opponents, although Montreal has more home games. But I think that's what the goaltending did, is that instead of being 6th in the lottery odds right now, the Canadiens would probably be 5th, because I don't think they'd be down in Columbus's range. Probably not. 8 points worse?
No.
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't be.
So really, you can look at it from that point of view, or you can look at it from the point of view that teams are always looking for goaltending. And there are a lot of teams in this league that don't know what they're going to do in terms of goaltending. And the Canadiens don't have that issue for the time being. They have these 2 guys. Jakub Dobeš has made incredible strides in Laval. I was in Laval on Friday night when he stopped 36 or 37 shots from Belleville and basically won that game for Laval, a critical game that they had to win. Asking Jean-François Huot at the end of the game, if you think back to November, could you have ever thought that Jakub Dobeš would have a game like this in March? And he kind of laughed, but he said, you know what? He's come a long way. Like, this is a great comeback story for the kid. And so they have that piece in Laval. Jacob Fowler's the best goalie in the country in the NCAA right now. The Volokin kid continues to play well. So it's goaltending is a situation that I think is looking good for the Canadiens. It's funny that blue line back, the future of the Canadiens is looking very sound. They're going to have a strong defense and they're going to have strong goaltending for many years to come. It looks like it.
Well, I don't think that Montembeault and Primo are necessarily going to provide them with star level goaltending, but at least there's a stability when it comes to Montembeault's play, his consistency. Also, he doesn't have like huge highs and lows in his performances. He's got better nights than others, which is rather normal. But I don't think that there's a bar that he's set, and usually he meets that bar in pretty much every game. So there's a level there of consistency that the Canadiens at least can work with for the next year or two, and then see how he develops, how Primo develops, how Dobeš develops, how the rest of the team develops, and probably the rest of the team at some point will decide, is it time for us to have an upgrade in goal? But I think that they can be very comfortable heading into next season with that duo. And the fact you started off by mentioning up the top that Primo won the Molson Cup, which is rather it's unexpected coming from this guy this year. I would not have thought that he would get what we could call the Carey Price Cup or the Carey Price Award.
Right.
But he did. I mean, so yeah. That's pretty good. And also when it comes back to just coming back to on Montembeault for a second, the goals against the goal save above average and above expectations. He's always been pretty good since he joined the Canadiens 5-on-5, but the main jump is really on the PK, because he was struggling mightily in the past on the PK, and honestly, his numbers are very good on the PK. Again, I mean,
Right.
this is a unit that struggled in the past. At times this year, it was abysmal. They've gotten better lately, but I mean, at some point, sometimes in this season, it was really bad. But him specifically, this is an area of his game that he's really worked on and has improved dramatically. So he's nearly like the top of the league when it comes to goal save above expectations on the PK. So that's super encouraging. You always hear that your goalie has to be your best player on the PK. I'm not sure if it's always the case. They certainly a good goalie will certainly bail you out and save your ass, but a unit that doesn't have a good structure or that makes poor decision or poor reads, I'm not sure in today's hockey how much a goalie can really save you in that department. But Montembeault is doing his part in that regard.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about goals saved above expected, and so I spent a good amount of time today after practice talking to Sam. Just kind of a casual conversation. It wasn't really an interview, but because I mean, the Olympics are coming up, and he's got a legitimate shot at the Canadian Olympic team. Like, he really does. He's not really getting talked about too much. The guys dominating the conversation have been Binnington, Tristan Jarry, Skinner in Edmonton, Binnington. I mentioned Binnington already, but I mean, he's on the fringes of that conversation because
Aiden
he's
Hill.
been a tandem goalie so far. Aiden Hill, sorry, he's the one I'm forgetting. Yes. But you look at goals saved above expected, according to Evolving Hockey's model, you got Hellebuck, you got Markstrom, Binnington's third, Demko, and then fifth is Montembeault. So of the four ahead of him, only one of them's Canadian, Jordan Binnington. So it doesn't all come down to that, but that's definitely a factor. So I asked him today, I was like, do you look at those goals saved above expected stuff? He's like, no, not during the season. Sometimes Rico. Did you know that Eric Raymond's nickname was Rico?
No.
I didn't know.
I heard something else, but not Rico. What's the other name that I heard? I heard another nickname. I can't remember it on top of my head, but certainly not Rico. No.
Anyhow, Sam referred to him as Rico, so that's a bit of intelligence for you there. Intel. He said sometimes Rico will show him some numbers, expected goals numbers. So I guess when he has a particularly good night in terms of goals saved above expected. But he said he doesn't look at it. He said sometimes in the offseason I'll look at it with my agent, which I found very interesting because if you think about last offseason, they were preparing for contract negotiations, and this number made him look quite good. And so I actually let him know it's on the Evolving Hockey, it's not this way, but when I was talking to him, I was under the impression it was Hellebuck, Demko, Markstrom, Ullmark, and UPL in Buffalo ahead of him. And that was on another list that I'd seen yesterday. I think that Jay Fresh list, actually, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, so you look at all those goalies, Sam, and none of them are Canadian. And he just kind of looks at me. He's like, "Yeah, you're right." It's like you got to be thinking about it, right? Yeah, you got to be thinking about it a little bit. And so, again, not to go back on the whole World Championship thing, but he's still not decided on the World Championships. He did ask an interesting question. He's like, "Wait, so if there's a Four Nations next year, does that mean there's no World Championships?" I'm like, "No, there's a World Championships next year." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So. But still, it's clear that this World Championships is a launching pad to that Four Nations tournament, which is a launching pad to the Olympics. And so it's to get on Hockey Canada's radar, being on that Four Nations team would be a huge help. And if Sam can get himself on that team, and we talked about Nick and Cole on Friday, but if Sam can get himself on that team, he's looking pretty good for Italy in 26. So,
because I mean, you look at that group of goaltenders. I think that Aiden Hill his performances since he has joined Vegas, they really speak for themselves. And when healthy, he's been really good. Jordan Binnington is a bit hot tempered, but I think that he would be like a more veteran at this point and could be. I mean, I could see him on that team. And Skinner is probably, depending if he continues on his upward trajectory next year, he could be also a very valid candidate. But when it comes to Sam Montembeault versus Tristan Jarry, Jarry's a bigger name. But I'm not sure if I would feel necessarily more comfortable with Jarry in front of the net than Montembeault, because there's that consistency that I was telling you about when it comes to Montembeault. You don't see that from Jarry. First, he's injury prone, but there's always something that he goes on those stretches where he's so good that he's really bailing out the Penguins. But he's not at the same time. He doesn't strike me as the epitome of consistency, So there's a chance there in the next year or so for Montembeault to make a case for himself and say, okay, in the country, out of those 5 guys, I can be at least number 3. There's a chance.
At least there's I think a very good chance, and I think it's just more people need to get with the program on what he's done the last couple of years, and so, but he's also, his sample is small, so it's on him to do it again, basically, and going to the World Championships to show you can perform in an international environment, again, do it again. I spoke briefly with Doug Armstrong about him when the Blues were in town. When I mentioned that, exactly. And so he already has that relationship, but it's the main thing that he's doing is doing it in the NHL against high quality opponents, and he's doing it against high quality players on these top teams. And so that's, I think, good for him. But I definitely think he deserves mention on that. Now, you mentioned his performance on the penalty kill. The month of March just ended, and the Canadiens finished the month, I can't believe I'm going to say this, tied for 3rd in the NHL on the penalty kill with a 90.5% success rate. Montembeault's obviously...
They were at a chance earlier in the season where they could have they could have had the worst PK in their history. It was that bad.
Yeah. And so it's and not only that, but they've been killing over 5 minutes shorthanded per game over the month. So it's not as if it's been because they've been gotten really disciplined all of a sudden. It's really not, and it's really allowed some players to shine, Montembeault being one. But Jake Evans and Yoel Armia have turned into sort of prime role players in this regard. And for my money, Jake Evans spoke today, and there are a lot of people talking about him, and he deserves credit. He's been good on the penalty kill. But honestly, to me, the best penalty killer on the team is Yoel Armia. It's really, and I don't consider it to be particularly close. He distinguishes himself on the penalty kill in so many different ways. He does it every night. And his skill set, everyone's always frustrated that he doesn't use his skill set to produce offensively. But those same skills allow him to be effective on the penalty kill. When he decides to attack the puck, he comes away with it. Those attack points where you have to decide to pressure on the penalty kill, I feel like every time he does that, the puck is down the ice. And so it's, I feel like the penalty kill has evolved as Yoel Armia grew in confidence and his game grew.
That's a good point.
I feel like there's a line there where the penalty kill grew at the same time.
Yeah, it's a very good point. In Armia, I think every second power play, I feel like he manages to kill 30 seconds off the opposing power play all by himself. Mm-hmm. So every second PK, I mean, not obviously opponent's power play, but so because he'll take the puck to the other end, kill some time over there, hold on to the puck, and he'll just waste a lot of time all by himself. Yeah. He's the only guy on the Canadiens who does that. Yeah, so Jack Evans has been very useful too. I think he's been winning a lot of faceoffs also defensively, and his numbers, his time on ice since Monahan has left has increased because they've tried to not use Suzuki more than they used to on the PK. So it's been just more and more of Jake Evans, and he's responded
it's not Monahan.
accordingly.
It's also Christian Dvorak.
Yeah,
losing Christian Dvorak on the penalty kill is the real problem.
Yeah.
So getting Jake Evans in there has been good.
So, but yeah, it's something to explore. The fact that there might be a correlation there between Armia's overall play, him coming into his own in the last 2-3 months, and the fact that all of a sudden the PK is doing so much better. But the power play, though, in March has gone the other way. So they haven't been good at all. It's completely the opposite. It's they've been 7.9.
Well, the Canadians are 7.9% in March. They're 31st out of 32 teams. Yeah. Only the Ducks at 7.1% have been worse. You know who's 30th though? It's the Toronto Maple Leafs at 9.1%, which is flabbergasting, really. I mean, you really not the way you kind of want the power play to be going into the playoffs. But anyhow, so Montreal's power play. You know, when we were in Nashville ahead of the trade deadline, Martin St. Louis gets burned sometimes when he starts talking this way, and I hope he doesn't get more guarded as a result. But he was talking in Nashville, and he was just so proud of what the power play had become. You know, how it had built an identity, and you know he was being asked about the shorthanded goals against, and because they had just given one up that was costly the night prior, I think at Tampa. And he said, you know, if you had told me that we would be giving up all these shorthanded goals, but we'd have a power play that looks like this, I would take the power play that looks like this because that takes time to build that. And the thing is that the power play has just slowly deteriorated ever since then. And it's really,
that's true.
It's really been interesting to watch because for a while they just weren't scoring, but it seemed like they were getting the same chances. There's Jones entries seem to be quite as efficient as they were before. But once the goals start not going in, then you see them starting to tweak things. Recently, they've taken to adding Alex Newhook to the zone entry mix, where he and Suzuki skate up ice together after the drop back pass. And so once those goals start not going in, then it produces seemingly a chain reaction that leads to now the power play just doesn't look good at all. Like really, I mean, it really does not. It has trouble getting set up in the offensive zone. They're not generating the same types of lateral chances they were before. And it all stems from what I feel originally was just some bad shooting luck. Like that's all it was at the start. But since then, it's gotten bad. And now to be 7.9% in March and still getting 5 minutes of power play time a game, that's as bad. Like Jake Evans was saying today about the penalty kill, how it provides momentum boosts. Except those momentum boosts, you know, how it allows like their best players to come out the other side and get some time, and they can establish zone time and get some chances. Well, the power play has the opposite effect. You know, when the power play gets off the ice, their four best forwards are tired. They have to throw out these funky combinations of players that don't have any real chance of scoring a goal against the other team's top players. So the 7.9% power play basically completely nullifies the 90.5% PK over the month in terms of momentum shifts. And moving forward, you know, the guys who play on the penalty kill, I mean, who knows, you know, it doesn't seem like something that's set in stone for the future. Whereas you look at the power play, and the four guys who are, or the four forwards at least, seem to be a part of this power play for a while. And it's not going well. It hasn't gone well for, well, aside from Newhook. Yeah, aside from Newhook. Well, Newhook will be on a second unit, let's say, or whatever. But yeah, it's what was so promising and looked like a real positive aspect of this season for the Canadians has quickly become really negative.
Well, I like the idea of asking Newhook to help with the zone entries because I think he's got the explosiveness and he's adept at that. He used to do that in Colorado in their second unit, but at the same time, Suzuki gaining the zone was never an issue. He's been the fancy stats about that suggest that he's very proficient at doing it. I think that there's an issue is sometimes the guys that are just standing still at the blue line waiting for him to do his thing, and there's a lot of waiting I find at the blue line, and that's something that could be revisited. But what I'm wondering is what is the impact, the negative impact in all this of having a second unit that's so inept? The fact that you cannot, if you don't get any rhythm in your first minute, but you have a decent second unit, you can ask PP2 to go out there and try to do their thing. But nowadays, you have the first unit will stay for a minute 35 probably. They really the other guys get only scraps. It's really not much. But if they were more effective, it would either put more pressure on the first unit to deliver. Maybe that it would force the other team to scout a different type of power play because you have a second PP that's legit, that maybe has a different approach, different looks based on who's out there. They don't even have to worry about that second unit because it's been so ineffective. So other teams really focus on that PP1, and obviously at some point scouting is so advanced now and there's so much video that you'll figure out tendencies. And they were doing so good. I think that I would say that even if they had stopped scoring goals until they left for their long Canadian trip out west, I thought that they were not scoring, but they were generating that momentum. But it seems that this all died while they were on their long trip, and they have not regained that since then. But
exactly. But I mean, as far as the second unit, the late great Red Fisher used to always write, "Show me the players." That's what the second unit is. Show me the players.
There's no players
to show. Exactly. So that's, and so in light of that, I don't blame Marty for running PP1 out there for a minute and a half, but there's 9 games left. I think, there's little gains to be made for individual players. I think the power play can look at these 9 games and be like, we have this amount of time to let's get it back on track so that we can go into the off season thinking we have something to build on here. So as we mentioned earlier, Christian Dvorak's going to be coming back. Not an April Fool's joke, people. And I find him to be an interesting. Well, first off, Christian Dvorak coming back would mean that Colin White doesn't have to play anymore, which I think everyone would agree would be just a benefit to everyone, including Colin White. It's really it's just not good what's going on with Colin White right now. And that's, listen, he's doing what he was asked to do, which was allow the Canadians to send, Mitchell Stevens to Laval so he can help them make the playoffs and just fill out a lineup
Gignac
where there's a center.
Actually, it was Gignac.
It was Gignac. That's right. It was Gignac at that time. That's right. You're right. And so he did that. Gignac's helping Laval in their playoff push. He's done what he was asked to do, but I mean, can't win a face anyhow. We're not going to turn this into an indictment of Colin White, but Christian Dvorak coming back would mean that Colin White wouldn't have to play anymore. And Christian Dvorak coming back, he's a real fascinating guy because, yes, he gets paid too much, but I feel he's more important to the functioning of the team than most people realize. Really good penalty killer, left-handed guy on draws. Newhook finding his game in the faceoff circle really mitigated the loss of Christian Dvorak, because without that, they were sending Evans and Suzuki out on left side draws, and it wasn't going all that well. Evans likes that he's worked more on his left side draws to try and be a factor on that side, but But Dvorak's that guy. They lost Dvorak and Monahan, actually, the two left side draws that were excellent. And so I don't know. Like, there's people say, oh, we got to trade. They got to trade Dvorak. They got to do this. They got to do that. And it's like at that number, if the Canadiens actually do want to try to become sort of a playoff-y team, like a team that's playing meaningful games, a team that's in a position of, say, the Capitals or the Islanders right now or whatever, I kind of feel like Christian Dvorak will help them get there if he can stay healthy, which is a whole other matter. But I think having a guy like that, a jack of all trades, face-off winner, penalty killer, who, yes, he doesn't produce much offensively, but doesn't destroy you offensively like the guy he would replace in the lineup does right now. I don't know. I just feel like letting that guy play next season, maybe trade him at the deadline, maybe not, let his contract expire, whatever. I think he could help this team achieve some goals next year that they kind of want. I think that they want to achieve.
Yeah. Well, I'll say two things. First off, I haven't seen very often a guy who's done for the year and ends up coming back before the year's over. He had a torn pectoral muscle, and he managed to recover much quicker than expected. So kudos to him, because he's been hampered by different injuries throughout his stay in Montreal, and the fact at least that he can get done with this one faster than expected, and being able to play a few games and then head back into the summer and probably do a different sort of training. It's always, when you have a long-term injury, it's always better if you can come back and play just even a handful of games. Your head is in a better place when you leave for the summer, and you don't have all these questions.
Him coming back quickly is even more miraculous when you consider just how long it took him to get back from his knee surgery. You remember he couldn't play until November. It was tough to watch. It was a tough recovery.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
And the other thing is, what I wonder, though, if we look at at maybe, how should I say, roster building, he's as long as he's on the Montreal Canadiens team, I feel like he's either competing with Evans or he's ahead of Evans. So I would pencil him ahead of Evans and say that next year he would be your third line centerman. And I have a hard time figuring out what's the identity that he provides his line. Let's say next year, the Canadiens, let's extrapolate and say that the Canadiens they have a healthy Kirby Dach, and they manage to find a top six forward who manages to bump Alex Newhook on the third line. Then on the third line, you have candidates like Newhook, Dvorak, maybe Joshua Roy, maybe Yoel Armia, if Yoel Armia remains the Yoel Armia that we've seen this season, or in the second half of the season. But three of those four guys, you got Josh Anderson too. Mm-hmm. So what sort of, are you going to make an offensive line out of that? Is it going to be a defensive line? Because I have not seen, when he was healthy, I have not seen Dvorak 5-on-5 generating any sorts of offense. And if you have a guy like Roy, who's really showing very interesting things with creative players, he's really shown that he's belonging in the NHL. You want to be able to see him thrive in offensive situations. Same for Newhook, who's also in the development stage of his career. You want to surround them with players who are going to facilitate that development. And I'm just not sure that looking at what Dvorak has done throughout the years in Montreal, that he's been that guy. He's been such a downer offensively because he has not been strong on transition, and he's not a particularly good skater, not a particularly good passer either. So I'm just not sure, as much as I would expect him. I don't think that he's going to be moved in the summer. I don't think that he's in a position where he's got any value for anybody. So they will have him next year. But as a third-line center, I just don't know what sort of identity that he helps bringing onto this team.
So So I agree with everything you just said, but what I would propose, like I think Alex Newhook is still better suited to the wing, but what he's done at center with his own line, not surrounded with extremely offensive guys, like Army is playing great, but is not a second line winger, which is what he's playing right now, and Brendan Gallagher's on his other wing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is still driving his own line and has been doing it for a while. And as mentioned before, his face-off improvement helps with that. But, it got me thinking, like, if you had a center, if you went down the middle, Suzuki, Doc, Newhook, and built three kind of semi-offensive lines, and then on the fourth line, you could have Evans and Dvorak on that line as, like, just a super defensive, shutdowny, face-off winning. You have a guy on both sides for face-offs.
Yeah.
Like on the road, a fourth line like that with whoever, with Harvey Pinard or whoever, Armia maybe, I don't know, like with Gallagher, with someone on the other wing who could play a role like that. And you're looking at a pretty darn good shutdown fourth line. Like that's pretty good
for sure,
for a year,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that way, and then there's no identity crisis there. Like you just go out and in any precarious situation, defensive zone draw, you're on the road. You don't know what the other team's throwing out there. Instead of having to throw Suzuki into that situation, you can throw those guys into that situation and save Suzuki for another situation where he can thrive offensively. So I think that could be a possible usage of him. That would be that, but in order for that to happen, the organization would have to be convinced that Newhook serves their purposes best at center. And I'm not sure if they're convinced that that's true, and I'm not sure if I'm convinced if that's true, but all I know is that he's played a lot better at center now than he looked at the beginning of the season when he looked lost at center. And so it's a possibility, and it creates, like, Newhook as a third line center with Joshua Roy and Josh Anderson, let's say, or like that's a good third line to go up against other third lines. You're looking okay. Yes. You're starting to get the feel of a team that's difficult to match up with.
Yeah, the fourth line that you're describing, because it's true that Christian Dvorak has played some left wing earlier on in his career.
And Evans has also played wing earlier on in his career.
So, but it's a luxury on a rebuilding team. It's a luxury to have that sort of fourth line, because it's almost like a fourth line that's built for the playoffs on a contending team, So
yeah, but he'll only be there for a year. I mean, they're not going to bring him back. Yeah, it's like it's one season's worth of fourth line. Plus you and I both know Dvorak will get hurt at some point. So, and for that matter, Kirby Dach might get hurt at some point. So it's like this is all theoretical, but it's on a healthy lineup, like for opening night on the road in Toronto, let's say, and you line Suzuki, Doc, Newhook down the middle, and then you come with like super shutdowny line 4. I don't know. It's like it could be a useful thing for them. And the point being is that Dvorak's a reliable player. Like that's you're absolutely right. Everything you said about him offensively, he's the most vanilla beige guy, eggshell white sort of paint kind of guy that you could possibly imagine offensively, but he does a lot of things defensively and away from the puck and in his own end, battling down low, winning draws that coaches rely on. He's a reliable player in many aspects. So does that usually get you paid $4.5 million? No. It did in his case because he has shown he was not always this way offensively. Like he showed flashes of offensive finishing. Well, definitely in junior, but in Arizona, the reason Mark Bergevin went and got him was that he's shown some potential to be a power play bumper. He scored some goals. He had some offensive flair. He doesn't seem to have it anymore. But he did. If the Canadiens just did
2 years ago. 2 years ago, he did end the season on a very productive.
He was the Canadiens' top scorer over the last 20 games or something a couple of years ago. Yeah. It's in him. It's in him, and then, but it's the thing that I find interesting with the Canadian situation, and I don't know if every fan or media member is that if they have the intention to approach next season like we want to compete for a playoff spot, like these are the kinds of decisions they'll have to make. Like they can't just they'll have to stop making decisions solely based on development and the future. Keeping Christian Dvorak and saying, oh, we're going to make him part of a super shutdown line, and that'll be a really good thing to have next year. It's the kind of decision that you would have to make. Like, even if someone came calling and said, like, okay, can you retain half of Christian Dvorak's salary and we'll give you a 5th round pick for him? If you're not trying to make the playoffs next year, then that's a no-brainer. Yeah, sure, let's do that. Whatever. Save $2 and something million bucks on the cap and add an asset, maybe a 4th round pick, whatever. But if you're actually trying to make the playoffs and you have this player, you don't need the cap space, and you're like, hey, we could do this with this guy and make sort of this shutdown line, this luxury shutdown line, as you mentioned. You only do those things when you're aspiring to actually take a step. And I think this team is aspiring to take a step of some sort. So it's not specifically about Christian Dvorak, but it's the type of decision that they might have to make next season. Like would Josh Anderson be given the rope that he got this year next year? Or at some point would they step in and say, we have to sit you? Like, we just can't. We can't have you playing when our standard is we're trying to make the playoffs. This year the standard wasn't that. There was no point in sitting him. It's other than because it's not even an effort thing. It's not like he's dogging it. He's just having a bad year, so you can tolerate it and let him try and play his way out of it when you're not aspiring to anything. But if they do legitimately aspire to something next year, and Josh Anderson comes out of the gate and has 12 games where he's just skating around and not really generating much, I don't know. I don't think they can be as patient with him under those circumstances as they have this year.
Well, we discussed in the previous episode about Martin St-Louis and accountability that will need to go up if they want to have not only a better process but better results next year. But you also need guys within your organization that are pushing for those spots. And if you remain too patient towards a veteran who's not productive, is he blocking the way from someone? And the reality is that you look at the young kids on this team, and apart from Joshua Roy this year, there was nobody that was really knocking at the door, waiting for a chance and saying, hey, nobody forced themselves in. Not Farrell, not Emil Heinemann.
Yeah.
It was just Roy. So there's Roy. Maybe that there's going to be a bounce back season from Harvey Pinard next season. So you're looking at those two guys and maybe, hopefully, another youngster that will come up and say, and be part of that new wave, because it's all good to see those guys on defense, but you also need a few forwards also that will challenge the veterans. So I think that will make a difference. So it's going to be true for Anderson. It's going to be true for Gallagher, and it could be true also for Dvorak, albeit that the depth at center is not the same that it is probably on the wing. So.
Well, you'll have Owen Beck. You'll have Owen Beck turning pro next year.
Yeah, but I expect
in all likelihood,
I would expect Beck to play in Laval next year, though. But,
I would too. But I'm saying at some point, if you're talking about like a Joshua Roy situation, like you could see that happening with Owen Beck perhaps next year. It's possible.
Yeah. He's got the maturity to say, well, if he starts off on the right foot in Laval at some point in the season, he could knock at the door. He could be that guy pushing. That's it. Yeah. Fair point.
All right. How about we go to our friend Greg McPherson?
Hear that jingle?
How about we hear from our good friend Greg McPherson? It is time for the mailbag. We do a mailbag every Monday,
Let's go to the mailbag. Mailbag. They reach out and they write to us.
I love that mailbag thing. Let's go to the mailbag.
Let's go to the mailbag.
Love it. Let's go to the mailbag.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So speaking of guys who could, we could start with this. Mark Carroll, who asked via email, hello, gentlemen. Florian Xhekaj is 19 and his birth date is in June. Does this mean we can expect him in Laval next season? Speaking of guys who could push at center, Florian Xhekaj, I think because he started, it's tough to say whether we can expect him in Laval. He's obviously there'd be an option. There's no indication one way or the other where he would be playing next year. I think with the massive jump he took this year in Brantford, it could be reasonable to think that he's ready for the next level. Like, he's never had this productive of a year. He didn't have it in junior B. He didn't have it in minor hockey. Like, it's just like every year that's been documented by elite prospects has never shown any production like the one that we saw this year from Florian Xhekaj. Interesting note on him. I was talking to Arber about him the other day, Arber Xhekaj, and so I thought they just kind of randomly shifted him to center, but apparently he's played center his whole life. Like, it was just last season when he got to the OHL where they moved him to the wing to kind of ease him in. But he's a natural center, and he's just been ripping it up. So it's him playing center. I don't know if he'll play center in the NHL. I don't know if he'll even play in the NHL for that matter. But him being a center, kind of being added to that mix in the middle with Beck and whoever else, there's not that many centers in the pipeline. It's pretty interesting. Mesher has also been playing a lot of center in Kitchener, which I find interesting. But yeah, I don't have any indication one way or the other, Mark, where if he would play in Laval next year, but he would be allowed to for that, if that answers your question.
Yeah, instead of going back to a 20-year-old season in Hamilton. He's got 2 years in the OHL.
Brantford, not Hamilton.
Well, actually, aren't they in Brantford only because they're renovating the Cups? I thought that
they changed their
Brantford
name.
Move was... Yeah?
Well, they're called the Brantford Bulldogs, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
because they're playing in Brantford.
Right, but if it was just temporary, wouldn't they still be called the Hamilton Bulldogs? Like when the Raptors played in Tampa, they didn't change their name to the Tampa Raptors, you know?
No, I'm ashamed that I don't know the exact clear-cut situation on that.
That's all right.
But you look at the Bulldogs, though. They have a couple. I mean, they have a couple of guys that are still rather young on that team. So maybe that there's also, where can you have the biggest impact? You know, if the Bulldogs head into next season thinking that they've got what it takes to make a run at the Memorial Cup, for example, it's probably a good thing if Xhekaj goes back there as a 20-year-old and leads that team, as opposed to be one of many young players in Laval scraping for ice time, and he ends up being like a fourth liner and waits his turn behind this guy or that guy. It's good to be in a situation where you're going to play significant minutes, and the fact that he only has two seasons of OHL hockey in him, it's not as though, you know, he's got 4 and he's got nothing else to learn. He's still developing. He's a great story, but I think that he could be in a position there where he leads the Bulldogs next season, and he would probably be in a more advantageous situation. It's a lower caliber, but in terms of development, there would definitely be something to gain from playing that 20-year-old season there. So,
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if they suggested that he'd stay there and benefit. Just even organizationally, it's also buying time for them. It's useful.
Yeah. So let's kind of piggyback on that whole and stay with the family. So we got a question from Ed Tamboni, or Tambini. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. He's been a huge Habs fan for over 50 years. J.C. Tremblay, Pete Mahovlich are my favorite players. Now, Arber Xhekaj is quickly becoming a favorite. My question is, since no one ever saw enough in him to draft him, where did his development occur? What happened to make someone, a coach, a scout, to say, hey, take a look at this player? Where did the change occur in Arber?
Yeah, okay, I can answer that one. So, because it did happen. There was such a scout in Montreal.
Yes,
So
there was.
For more than a decade, there was a former Canadian scout named Matt Turek, who's now running the Bulldogs. He's the GM there. So he's been running a summer hockey camp at the Mohawk Four Eyes Center in Hamilton. So it's like a 4-on-4 league in the summer, and so they got kids there that are like minor hockey development. That you've got junior guys and you've got the pros. And Arber Xhekaj has been participating at this hockey camp for many years, and the progress that he showed Turek from one year to the next was significant enough that at some point Turek started bugging the rest of the Canadian scouting staff, Martin Lapointe being one of them, and say, "Hey, you need to take a look at this guy." So that's how he arrived on the Canadians' radar, through Turek's insistence. So Xhekaj was never listed in the by Central Scouting, so that he was really off the radar. He went undrafted twice. Let's start with that. He's undrafted twice. Then the OHL canceled their season because of the pandemic in 2021. Turek adapted his summer school and his summer camp to make it available to those who were not playing. So Xhekaj went to that camp, had to pay for it, and that's when he ended up working at Costco for all this time, stocking shelves and whatnot. And then went undrafted the third time. But then at that point, the Canadians had him on their draft list for 2 years. So the second time and the third time that he went undrafted, he was somewhere on the Canadians list. But the third time, they pondered, the possibility of drafting him. And eventually they said, okay, he's 19-year-old. He's going to play his 20-year-old season in the OHL next year. There's a good chance that he might slip through the cracks and that he's not going to get drafted at all. If he's not, we'll invite him to our camp. They were not the only teams to submit an invitation. The Florida Panthers did too. But then, because of Matt Turek's connection with Montreal, because also the Montreal Canadiens were Arber's father's favorite team, he chose to go with Montreal. And from that point, the rest is history. But there was indeed a scouting connection, somebody who saw him, you could argue, before everybody else. So it didn't come for Arber Xhekaj and the Canadians. It didn't come out of the blue. They had, I would argue, a more significant book on him than other teams just because of Matt Turek.
Well, I mean, the Florida Panthers connection, their director of scouting, amateur scouting, is Shane Churla. He would have been privy to some of those pleas from Matt Turek about Arber Xhekaj. The only thing I would add to that is I spoke to Jonathan Kovacevic about this because he was also at those camps during the pandemic. He comes from just south of Hamilton. And so he's, his memory of Arber Xhekaj in those camps was kind of like, so he was in the pro group, even though he wasn't yet an NHL player, but he was a drafted player. And he just remembers thinking, like, who is this guy? Like, who is this guy who's playing in a pretty high caliber camp, and not only holding his own, but like shit talking. Like, who is this guy? Like, who is this guy who's like, who's getting a little rough with me and who's like talking smack on the ice and all this? Like, I want to know who this guy is. And so like he like made an effort to kind of get to know him, but like he's like the confidence that Xhekaj had in that environment was really impressive for him to see. Undrafted guy, no one knew him, and he just walked in there like he owned the place. Was kind of what Kovacevic said. Like so that swagger that you see now existed then when he was working at Costco, so he could pay for the ice time and all. Like the Costco thing never diminished the swagger. Like he showed up there like he belonged, and it really it made an impression on the participants in that camp. And like, you would think a camp in the Hamilton area, that's probably a pretty there's some names that can't skating there, and Jack guy didn't care, just didn't care, just showed up and just broad shoulders, swaggering in.
Yeah, actually, he would have been. I mean, he was supposed to be with the junior group, and it's the pros at that camp that asked Dvorak, say, "Hey, can this guy come with us?" So the pros saw that he had that component, that ingredient in him that would raise the level of competition for the pros there. So, yeah, for sure there were some guys that were intrigued. And you mentioned Costco. Yeah. I mean, for a story that I wrote when I was at the Athletic, I briefly spoke to his boss at Costco,
the manager,
Sarah.
He still says it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He spoke to Sarah. The look on Arber's face every time he said the word Sarah. Yeah. I think her name was Sarah.
Yeah, she was not. She didn't want to. She said
didn't want to comment.
No, she said that those things were private matters, and there was confidentiality. Yeah. So she hid behind that.
I remember when you spoke to her, and the story came out on him while we were on the road. The Canadians were on the road, and I was on that trip, and you weren't. Yeah. So I got to tell Arber that you actually spoke to Sarah. It's like, hey, my buddy was writing that story. Marc Antoine was writing that story about you, and he actually spoke to your manager. He's like, what? Oh, he spoke to Sarah? It was so funny. Anyhow.
Yeah.
All right.
That's good.
Next question.
Let's move. All right. Here's one from Max, who's sending us a question on X. Offer sheets are rare, but I feel like Montreal could really use it on Quinton Byfield. 5 times $8.5 million. That would leave LA Kings with $14 million of cap space, with only 13 roster players and no goalies. Lots of ifs, but that player for a first, a second, and a third, sign me up. It puts the pressure on Montreal being good soon. So he's asking for our thoughts regarding the offer sheet route. I think Byfield's a good candidate. I think that Max is totally right to look at players who are looking for a raise in the context of a team that's got a lot of guys to sign. Because there's no point in aiming for a guy that, obviously that the team can match the offer. The LA Kings, though, would probably accept to renounce to other players if it meant keeping Byfield, because this is not an outrageous amount for them. They would probably say, they would probably look at a number like that and say, well, if we could make it more than 5 years, that'd be okay. But I think Byfield could be a good candidate for an offer sheet. Maybe Martin Necas also, because Carolina has got a lot of guys to sign. So it's going to be. They've got the Hurricanes got Gensel, Necas, Jarvis, Teravainen, Drury, Brady Shea, and Brett Pesce. Some of them are UFA, some of them are like RFA guys that are significant enough that you want to sign them. So signing all those guys would cost maybe around $45 million, and their cap space will be closer somewhere between 30 and 35 million. The Kings would they could save some money if they were to buy out KK. They would.
The Canes,
they would save. Yeah. So
and they would. I think KK would be young enough where they would only have to pay him a third. I believe he would qualify for the 1/3 buyout as opposed to the 2/3 buyout. So.
Absolutely, he would. So that way, the Canes could save $4 million right there. They would have to pay him maybe. Their penalty would be something like a little north of $800,000, but that would be for 8 years because he will have 6 years left. So I don't know if they want to go that route, but that would be a way for them if they want to hold on to Jarvis and Necas at any price. But otherwise, Byfield's an interesting candidate.
Yeah,
I
my
think
thing
the
with
Canadians at some point will have to be creative and be gutsy in what they want to do and how they can use their draft capital in order to get better.
the thing with Byfield and the hypothesis, and I should note that on email, Curtis Hubsher also asked a question about Byfield that was very similar. His he was looking at $9 million a year, and I think that's you have to overpay. Like the 5 times 8.5 number, it would be similar to Don Waddell just running straight to like, where do I sign? I'm matching this in my sleep. It's like, I don't think the Kings would hesitate 1 second to take a chance on Byfield at $8.5 million a year. Yes, 5 years walks. It'd be Sebastian Aho all over again. Like it really, you have to go above and beyond what's reasonable in order for an offer sheet to work. Like that's the thing. That's what the Hurricanes did with KK. They offered him a number that didn't make much sense. It was to get him out, to make the Canadiens think twice about matching, which they obviously didn't. So to get Byfield out of LA, I almost 9.5. Like you gotta go to a number that's really ridiculous for them to even think about letting him walk. Because they don't want to watch him walk out the door, and so it has to be a number that's just so outrageous. And dare I say, 10 million? I don't know. That's what you're talking about though with offer sheets. This is why you don't see offer sheets, because you need to make an offer so outrageous that the team won't match it. But if the Canadiens were to do that, how precious would it be that the reason the Kings couldn't afford to match the offer sheet is because they have Pierre-Luc Dubois on the books at $8.5 million a year. The irony there.
That's a good point.
The irony there, and actually, Phil Deneau, I don't think anyone complains about how much he makes there, but you have Pierre-Luc Dubois at $8.5 million. If they were to sign Quinton Byfield to an $8.5 million a year offer sheet, which again, the Kings would match in a heartbeat, but if they didn't, because they gave that money literally to Pierre-Luc Dubois, it'd be funny. It'd just be a funny little turn of events, but it's not going to happen. I really don't. The idea of offer sheeting Quinton Byfield is fine. 5 times 8.5. I think even 5 times 9, 5 times 9.5. It's not going to get it done. It has to be a number that the Kings are like, what, we literally can't justify this in any way, shape, or form. I really think it has to start. It starts with an 8-figure number. I think it's got to be over 10 a year.
Well, anyway, they might have plenty of spots to fill with new contracts for next season, but all of those spots, Byfield will be their number one priority. So they're going to lose Arvidsson. And they're going to say, well, too bad he's gone. Matt Roy, we'll replace him with a young D that we've got. Cam Talbot, they had him on the cheap. They'll figure out a way to have another goalie on the cheap. They're not going to lose Byfield because he's among their young forwards. He's the best one they got. So they're not going to let him go.
So that's which is why you have to go really big with an offer to have any chance of it working. And the other factor, don't forget, it's not just simply submitting an offer sheet. It's the player has to sign the offer sheet. That's the part that I think everyone forgets. That and frankly, in the history of offer sheets, there probably have been offer sheets made that just weren't signed. I'm sure we just never found out about it. That they were submitted, they were sent to the agent or whatever, and the player just didn't sign it. I'm sure it happens a lot more regularly than we even know. So that's the other thing to keep in mind with the offer sheets, is that Byfield himself would have to want to sign it.
Yeah.
Let's get one from. Okay, well this is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and so I'll just deal with it quickly. But Christian Capes asks, given the number of offsides that aren't called during a game, seeing the number of goals being reversed due to coach's challenge, how come the NHL does not invest in a tracking technology like Hawkeye in tennis or something else? This could revolutionize the game by being used on offside calls, possibly disallowing goals, etc. It could also speed up the game, provide more accurate results, and be a possible additional entertainment for fans to look up to, maybe on the Jumbotron. Will there be an appetite for that, or the NHL being so conservative they prefer the status quo? Thanks, from Christian. So a couple of things on this. First off, if you'll just allow me to briefly rant.
Go on, man. I know it's been on your chest for a long time.
It's even like the Canadians have had a couple of successful offside. I just hate it. I hate the offside challenge because there are so many missed offsides during a game. So it's not about the integrity of the game. It's not about just get the call right. It's cherry picking which situation we want to get the call right on. It's only in goal scoring situations, sometimes 30, 40, 50 seconds before the goal was scored. Make it stop. Make it go away. I hate it. It has to be just stop. Stop with the offside challenges. I think they should be out. Anyhow, I did speak to some people who the company's name is SMP. They do all the player tracking and puck tracking stuff, and all the stuff you see on NHL Edge comes from them. And I spoke to them about the technology involved. It's really quite interesting. Like, you basically have like a configuration of cameras throughout the building. I forget the number, but it's a very high number. It's more than 20 cameras. And what that does is it creates just kind of a net of coverage. And the sensors are these little tags. They're about that big. They're tiny. They're not big. That are sewn into the players' jerseys. And inside the puck, there's a number of them all around the puck. Now, the shape of the puck, I was told, is what makes it difficult for things like this, for checking offsides, for checking goals. That the way that if you remember when they brought this in, it was very difficult for them to find a puck that felt the same as the old puck, but had the sensors inside.
Yeah.
And so the solution they came up with doesn't provide full coverage of the puck, if you get what I mean. Like, it can't figure out, or it can't dictate. No,
detect.
What is detect? Thank you,
detect.
God. Detect. Every single inch of the puck is not detectable. So while so like my thing was like, for goals, like, why not just put sensors? Why not use that same principle and create that web of coverage in the net itself, so that there's like kind of a force field within the net? But the problem is that the goal line has a certain width to it. The blue line definitely has a lot of width to it. And the sensors in the puck don't cover the entire puck. So when you're looking on a goal to see, is there white? Do you see white ice between the goal line and the puck? The sensors can't detect that. And so that's what I was told. I don't think there's not an appetite. I think there's a big appetite from the NHL to find a definitive solution to this, the way VAR works in soccer or what have you. Like, I think the NHL would love it. It just doesn't sound like it's technologically able to just yet.
No, because you have you have to take into the equation a line, a puck, and a skate of one of two teams, because it cannot be mistaken for the skate of a defender.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's three parameters that I think will make it difficult to figure out. One day the technology will get there, but
they're really close. I think they'll get there really soon. They're close. I mean, it's what they already do. It's pretty good, but
yeah,
we'll get there. But thanks for the question, Christian. It allowed me to perpetuate my belief that we're nitpicking on offsides and we need to stop.
Yeah, we sure do. Okay, quick one here from Rachel, more? A.K.A. Yeah, go ahead. Well, I have two more because this one's super easy.
Okay.
Mike Matheson's the best skater in the Habs organization since who?
Who said that? Rachel,
a.k.a. Amelia Pond.
Okay, Amelia Pond. Okay, so she's best skater since Paul Byron. I think it's not you don't have to go too far back. Paul Byron. I mean, I don't know, if you said Mike Matheson best edge work since, maybe I'd have to think a little bit more.
Yeah.
But just as an
Yeah,
overall
because he's
skating
got.
ability, Paul Byron's up there with Mike Matheson any day of the week.
Yeah, I think in terms of edge, agility, whatnot, Matheson's probably superior, but the
Hmm.
explosiveness that Byron had was second to none.
Yeah.
So yeah.
In
Okay.
terms of edges,
Yeah,
in
you
terms
want
of
to.
edges, it would probably be PK.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, he could turn on a dime.
He was incredible. Really, really, really strong. Yeah.
Probably relied on that a bit too much sometimes. He
But
would skate out of trouble.
he single handedly killed forechecking schemes. I mean, honestly, like it was because he goaded guys into him and just spun away, and the forecheck was dead. So yeah,
Yeah.
best edge work since PK would be, but best overall skater since Paul Byron for sure.
Okay, I got one last for you. Motor Suzuki Drive By is asking us: have the Canadians been able to scout Demidov more than they were Mishkov last year? Any hints on their view of him as a prospect? To my eyes, he has similar skill with more size and competitiveness.
Um, I'm not sure if they've been able to scout Demidov more than they did Michkov. I think the fact that they didn't go to see Michkov and the situation not having changed for the better at all since then over there would lead me to deduce. There's that word again. Oh no, that was detect. Would lead me to deduce that I doubt that the Canadians have gone over there. Listen, Nick Bobrov is a Russian citizen, hasn't lived there in a very long time, but he has Russian citizenship. But the situation being what it is, the complications of going to see Michkov, which still remain in place, were that there's a litany of reasons why. But the big one was, sure, maybe he can get in the country. There was some question as to whether can he get out? Can he get out of the country?
Yeah.
And so, obviously having Russian scouts on the ground in Russia would be better. But the Canadians let their Russian scout go some time ago. So they don't have anyone on the ground. I don't think, listen, they still drafted 2 Russians last year. Presumably not having seen either of them live. Actually, they didn't see either of them live. I don't think it's going to stop them. And I don't think that's why it's part of the reason why they didn't draft Michkov, but it's a very, 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 very small part. So I don't think in Demidov's case it's going to make. I don't know if they've gone to see him again. I presume they haven't, but I know that there are certain people in the organization who see him in a much different light than they saw Michkov last year.
Yeah, I don't think that they would stop. It would not stop them from drafting him. If they're in a position to draft Demidov, they're not going to be scared away because he's Russian or because they might not have seen him live.
Yeah,
I think that in the question, the competitiveness aspect, I think, plays a big part. Demidov has great skill level with the puck, great skating ability, great balance, a lot of nice passes against the grain, but there's also a competitiveness when he goes after the puck carrier. His backtracking is very good too. He doesn't stop playing when he doesn't have the puck. I think there's an intensity to this player that makes him more well-rounded and hence probably more attractive to the Canadians. Very quickly, you mentioned that they don't have a proper scout for in Russia with boots on the ground in Russia. Did you hear the story about Igor Aronko? So Igor Aronko used to be a colleague of ours because he used to be a reporter. I think it was for Sport Express in Russia. And I remember talking to him when I was back at La Presse. I wrote an article about the state of the KHL, and he had some very independent thoughts about the whole situation. And one day, He stopped being a reporter and he was hired to become assistant general manager. I believe it was for Omsk. So he switched to management. And then back in August, he was hired by the San Jose Sharks to be an amateur scout for them in Russia. And only a couple of weeks ago, he was let go by the Sharks. And Mike Greer, lambasted him in words like, "Oh my God, criticizing for the fact that he was not showing up for games and he was doing it half-heartedly." And it was, if you guys are curious to know, type Eronko Mike Greer, and there was a long explanation from the Sharks general manager, but it was quite fascinating. First, his career arc is unusual. I would not expect to be, as much as I would like to become like assistant general manager of a pro hockey team and a scout for an NHL team. From my vantage point, I'm not picturing it to be like a feasible thing to do. So that hats off. I wouldn't even want to.
I wouldn't even want to.
No,
for this very reason, is that we have, as bad as the media industry is, we have way more job security than these guys do, because it can go like that,
Well, you have to do the job, and clearly Igor didn't do it. So here's a team that had boots on the ground, but it was only one boot instead of two. So
one boot was out the door.
To a series of problems. Yeah, that's it. He got the boot. Eventually, he got the boot. So there you go. All right, so we're done for today, huh? Right?
Yeah, we're done. Thanks for all the questions for the mailbag. We'll be back on Friday. The Canadiens face, the Panthers tomorrow, which just continues their run of running into horses. So we'll see how they do. But yeah, we'll be back on Friday, Future Friday, obviously every Friday. But until then, have a good week, and we will talk to you then.